Hello folks, in this video I'm going to show you how to build your own Postman alternative. This is what you're going to get at the end of this tutorial. So basically it's a very simple thing. You have a little form and you can do a send to an endpoint and get your responses coming in with response codes. You'll be able to change the request types and all of that stuff. And again, it's going to send and tell you what's coming back. You'll be able to clear the form and all of that stuff. This is actually going to be basically this little module here that I've added to the Trongate module market. It's free of charge. There is no copyright. And if anyone from Postman's watching this, they will be laughing because it's very, very simple. But what I've discovered is that sometimes, in fact, for 99% of cases, something simple is exactly what we need, you know. So this kind of thing is not going to be complicated at all. It'll be quite simple, and we're going to build the whole thing from scratch using the Trongate framework. So if you're up for that, then let us begin. I'm going to ask you to head over to trongate.io. If you've never used Trongate before, it's a free PHP framework. It will always be free. There are a few people nervous thinking I'm going to charge or something. I promise it's never ever going to happen. It's free forever. All we ask is, if you like this, we would be really grateful if you could give this a star on GitHub. That's all we're asking of you. Anyway, if you go to trongate.io and click on download Trongate, you'll see a page like this that shows you the download page for the Trongate desktop app. Now, you don't need the Trongate desktop app, but it's just a little app that gives us a whole bunch of features that are very useful, and some of them, quite frankly, you could not use with a command line interface. For example, we have a graphical query builder. We have an entire app store. There's all sorts of stuff on it. It does automatic updates, module generation, a gazillion other things, and it's going to make life easy. Oh, and did I say it's free? So I'm going to encourage you to go to trongate.io/download and download the free Trongate desktop app. It will make life easier. Now, if you are one of those paranoid types, then that's okay. You can also get it from GitHub as well. Everything that you're going to see in this tutorial is free forever. You have my word. Anyway, assuming that you're okay with that, the next thing I'm going to ask you to do is open up the Trongate desktop app. Now, by the way, for some of you users, like Mac users, you might end up with a little icon like this. I'm using a sort of prototype one here that I'm just mucking about with, and basically when you open it up, it's going to look something like this. Okay, this is what you get, right? So with the Trongate desktop app, I'm going to ask you to click create new app, and we're going to choose new Trongate app, and I want you to give your app a name. Now, it can be anything you want. Just try to avoid strange characters if you can. So I'm going to just call this one tutorial. There you go. Now it's going to ask you to choose a base URL. It will suggest one, and in most instances the one that is suggested will probably be fine. By the way, I am using XAMPP, and I've got MySQL running and Apache. Okay, XAMPP is a free download. It gives you PHP and MySQL, absolutely free, and I would encourage you to use something like that, whatever you're into, and just make sure that you've got PHP and MySQL working. All right. So anyway, if you're happy with the base URL, click submit. Then we're going to enter our database connection details in JSON format. Now, don't worry if you don't know how that works. Just click on the text area. It will give you some suggestions, and for most people, this will be fine, but if you need to change any of these, be my guest. You probably won't need to though. So let's click submit. And I've already done one called tutorial. Am I not a genius? Okay, so let me just quickly catch up. I'll call it Postman tutorial. There you go. So submit. And you'll notice that I added spaces in the app name. It's absolutely fine, you know. So now we're just going to choose a location for the new app. And for me, it's going to be inside htdocs. So I'm choosing htdocs and I'm clicking create new app here. And I'm going to generate new app. And there we go. So what's happened is it's just downloaded the latest version of Trongate from GitHub. It's done all of the configuration and it has even created a database for us. If you look inside PHP My Admin, you'll see that there is a database there. Now it's an empty database, there's nothing there, but at least it's done all of the configuration. It's probably saved us about 15 minutes or something. So if we click on view your new app, you'll get something that looks like this. Now I'm zoomed in, so maybe for you it's more like this, right? And that's our app. If you look at the URL, you'll see the base URL there, localhost / Postman tutorial. And this is a pretty good time to begin. So let me open up the folder that we just got. Now that was my little practice run. Here it is here. And up on the top left, you can see a bunch of files and folders. This is the Trongate framework. Notice that if you go to config and config.php, we can take this out here, but notice that our base URL and a whole bunch of stuff has all been set up for us. In this case, we have what's called a default module of welcome, and I should explain everything in Trongate is a module. A module just means a folder. That's all. It's just a folder. And you'll see that we've got a modules directory here, and this is where all of our modules go. At the moment, it's saying the default module is welcome. So do you see how we've got a welcome module? It's saying the default controller is called welcome, and sure enough, we have a welcome controller. And finally, it's saying that the default method is index, and sure enough, we do have a little thing called index that loads up a view file. And if you go into the views folder of welcome, you'll see this view file is called welcome. And if we click in, if we click in here, there is our HTML code that gives us this nice blue page here. So that's basically how that works. Now, if we were to say, for example, function test, I'm just going to echo hello world here and save this. And if I go to the base URL /welcome /test, you'll see that it says hello world, okay? No real surprises, but that's us creating a custom endpoint. Now, the Trongate desktop app has got all sorts of code generators and fancy shenanigans, but we're not going to bother with that here. I would rather just build the thing manually, because sometimes it's nice to do that, you know. So I'm actually done with the Trongate desktop app. I'm going to quit that, and I'm going to go into this modules folder here, and I'm going to create a new module, or a new folder in my case, same thing. I'm going to call it post person. Now you can call it anything you want, but that works for me, right? Now I'm going to have a new folder in here called controllers, and another new folder called views. Inside controllers, I'm going to have a new file called post person.php with a capital P. I'm going to be going quite fast here, but please do remember you can slow down the video if you want, right? And also remember that you can download this free of charge. It's right here. You can just download it. You don't even need to watch the tutorial. It's here, you know. Video demo and everything. So you have that option. Anyway, I'm going to be going quite fast here, so let me just go open up some PHP tags. I'm going to see if I can build this in less than an hour. So I'll say class postperson extends Trongate, and then I'm going to say function index. I'm going to echo here we go. Now if I head over to the new app, and if I go to postperson, you'll see that it says here we go. There's not really any need to say index, because index is a default, and that is us ready to rock and roll. Now instead of saying here we go, I'm going to build up an array of all of the possible request types. In PHP there's lots of different ways of creating arrays. The way that I like is something like this. I'm going to say request types. Let's have get. So request types get is get, and I'm going to have 4 of these. Let's have get, post, put, and delete. Now I'm sure that there are other request types, and if you want to add them, be my guest. But one of the cool things about Trongate is that we can say JSON. It's a little function that I've added, and if we say JSON request types, it will show you, funnily enough, all of the key value pairs that we have just created here. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to say this view. I'm going to create a view file. I'll call the view file postperson. What a ridiculous name, right? Anyway, we'll do that. And into the views folder, we're going to create a new file called postperson.php. And if we save and refresh, there we go. There's our view file. Now, if we attempt to echo request types, it's just going to say not found. Doesn't have a clue what we're talking about. So what we're going to do is we'll take these request types and we're going to make them part of a data array. Maybe we can have a key of request types equal to request types, and I'm going to now pass in that data array. If any of you have ever used CodeIgniter, this should be very familiar. So that's what we're doing here, okay? And now, well, it's an array, so it's still going to be a bit strange. But if we say JSON request types, there you go. So we've now got access to all of those request types. So what I'd like to do now is I'm going to build a nice HTML page. It's basically a one-page app, this that we're doing, you know, or it's actually a module, strictly speaking. But I'm using Emmet, so I'm going to do an exclamation mark and a tab. And I'll give the page, I'll give the page a title of postperson. And I'm going to add in an H1. It's not really any need to indent, but I'll do an H1 and I'm just going to say postperson. Okay, so save and refresh. And there we go. Now, I'm going to be building a form and I'd like to do some styling and make this look nice. So I'm going to add in a style sheet. I'm going to say link tab, and I'm going to have a style sheet that lives at the base URL CSS, and it's called trongate.css. It's going to really make life much easier. So save that, refresh, and there we go. You can see that the font has changed, and I'm obviously zoomed in, okay? I'm also going to add a little JavaScript file that's going to come in handy called app.js. I'm going to go right to the end of the code, but before the closing body tag. I'm going to say script, and then source equals. Now this one is going to live at base URL, and it's going to be js/app.js. There is a JavaScript file there, and that's going to be kind of useful for us. Okay, now if we save and refresh, nothing much happening. So let's now do a little bit of additional styling of our own on this page. So I'm going to say style, and I'm going to say body, and then comma dot modal heading. Now we don't have a modal heading yet, but we will later on. And I'm going to say background color. Let's go with hash symbol FF5500, and then we'll give it a font color. So I'll just say color is white. So hash FFF, save, refresh, and there you go. Not too bad, Dash, not too bad. All right. Now, for the H1, I would like to align it to the center. Now, you could say H1 text align center. You can do that if you want. But just to let you know, you can also say H1 class equals text center, and it does the same thing. Because Trongate CSS has pretty much everything you need. And that's right there if you want it, okay? So that's kind of cool. What else can we do? Well, you know, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking maybe we should say H1 margin top 1M. Seems like the right thing to do, okay? So now we're going to build a form. Okay, now this is going to be a form that's using all JavaScript actually. It's kind of unusual for me to build something like this. I like PHP, but this one's going to be all JavaScript. So very unusually, I'm going to take out this action thing. And we're just going to have these ordinary form tags, okay? And I'm going to go into PHP, and I'm just going to echo form underscore label. And with this, I'll say request type, like that, and then close off the PHP. Now that's going to give us a nice little form label, but as you can see, it's a way over on the left hand side, but don't worry, we'll fix it in a second. Now underneath this, we're going to echo form drop down. I'm going to have a drop down menu with a name of request type, and it's going to have all of the request types as the options. So I'm going to pass in request types, and the selected one, the one that I want to show up as the selected option, is going to be post. That will be the default, right? So let's just save it and refresh, and there we go. You can see we've got this drop down here. Now do you see how that's filling the whole page and it kind of looks a bit rubbish? Let's go to the form and we'll add in a class of container. And when you do that, everything comes in and it just tightens it up a bit, you know? So I think that's kind of cool. Kind of cool. And one of the other things that we can do as well, by the way, because we're going to be using a lot of JavaScript, I would like to give this thing, this select thing, an ID. Now, there's a couple of ways of doing this. You can say something like attribute ID equals, maybe give it request type, and we can pass in this attribute array here. Now, if I just view the source code, here it comes. And if you look closely, do you see how our select has now got an ID of request type? So you can do that if you want like that. It's perfectly valid. Alternatively, if you prefer, I mean, this is just an array, so you could also just say, let's have an array with ID assigned to request type, and that has exactly the same effect. So whichever one works for you is fine. The whole idea is that this form helper is looking for a name, in this case the array of options, the selected value, and then an optional array of attributes. That's basically what we've got here, okay? Now, underneath this, I'm going to echo form label, and this one is going to say target URL. Okay, so this is going to be obviously a form input field, a text field even, that you add in the URL that you're going to query. So I'm going to echo form input. I'm going to call it target underscore URL. I'll leave it empty by default. And well, if we just save that as it is, you can see we've got this text field here. But we can do better. For example, again, we could make up our little attribute thing. I'll call this one attribute 1 actually. And this time I'm going to say placeholder equals enter your target URL here. And maybe attribute 1 ID. See, you can add more than one. I'll maybe give it an ID of target URL. And now we can go like that. And as you can see, we've got a nice placeholder there. And if you were to view the source code, you'd see that we've also somewhere here got an ID of target ID. Pretty cool, right? So that takes care of that. Now I'll add one more thing onto this. I'm just going to say echo form label, and we'll just have parameters, okay? And I'll say echo form text area. Now this is going to have a name of parameters. By default it's going to be empty, and perhaps we should pass in some more attributes. So let's just say attributes 2. I'll say placeholder equals something like enter your parameters here in JSON format. So the idea is that somebody can add in a JSON string and effectively simulate posting values, you know. And I'll just say attribute 2 with a key of ID is going to be parameters. Okay, so that's going to be that, and I'm just going to say comma attribute 2. I'm passing it in, and if we refresh, now you can see we've got a text area here. By the way, you can even add rows if you want a bit more room. So you could say attribute 2. How about rows? Maybe we could say let's have 7 rows. Save and refresh, and now it's got a bit more space, you know. Pretty cool, pretty cool. All right. So now I'm going to add in a submit button. So normally, by the way, I would say form submit, and I would do something like that normally, and it would give me a nice submit button. But because we're just using JavaScript here, and I don't really want it to submit anything, well, quite unusually, I'm just going to say form button. Okay, there we go. Now I'm going to add in another form button. Let's say form button. This one I'll give it a name of clear and a value of clear form. All right, so this first one represents this first argument represents the name of the button, and the second one represents the value. So now we've got 2 buttons, right? So let's see if we can make these buttons look a little bit better. I'm going to go to the styling part of this again, and I'm going to say that button is going to have a background color of all the 3s. So it's really dark, you know, and a border of 1 pix, all the 3s, solid. So save and refresh, and there we go. Then I'm going to say text transform uppercase, font weight bold. Looks pretty good. And let's do a little hover effect. So we'll say that for button, when we hover, so colon hover, we'll just say that the background color goes black. So all the zeros in border, 1 pix, black, solid. Alright, so as I'm hovering, do you see how it's gone a little bit darker? That's the vibe. Now for the clear form thing, we can do something with that. How about if we pass in, and again, you could use this attribute method if you want, but I'm going to just show you that you can use the other method. We can pass in an array, perhaps with a class assigned to alt. I would like an alternative button, so alt, okay? And if we refresh, we've got this transparent button, but I think we can make it look a little bit better than that. Doesn't really work with this orange background, you know? So I'm just going to say that for .alt background color is all the C's. I'll say border is all of the C's solid. There it is. And when we hover over it, we'll make it go white. So alt colon hover. It's going to be pure white. So there we go. Kind of cool, kind of cool. All right. Now, the next thing that I think we're going to do is we're going to start adding a little bit of JavaScript magic onto this. So, for example, when somebody submits this, I want it to run a JavaScript function of some sort. So let's just go back to this submit button here. And I'm going to have an array. I'm going to have onClick assigned to send with parenthesis, right? So let's build a little JavaScript function that's going to send the data. I'll head downstairs here. I'm going to say script. Let's say, make this a bit bigger for you. I'll say function send alert ahoy. Okay, so save and refresh, and when we click submit, you can see we have a pop-up window here. Pretty cool. Now, what this is going to do is we're going to get these three different values here. So I'm going to say var request type is document.get element by ID. Now it was called request type, and I'm just going to say dot value. So if we alert request type, save and refresh, you'll see that it says post, and if we change it, get, and all of that stuff. Now the other two fields are going to be even easier. Let's say var target URL is document get element by ID of target URL dot value, and then we've got the other one, of course. I'll just call it params this time. So params is document get element by ID of parameters dot value. Okay, so just to prove that that works, let's just do an alert on the target URL and another little alert on the params. It's just to give you the peace of mind that this does work. So here we go, here we go. Oh ho 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 ho, well it does not work. Okay, so document get element by ID parameters alert. Give me a wee second here. Cannot read properties null of get attribute. Okay, don't worry about that. Postperson 55. What the name of Sam's Hill? Have I got the right ID? Oh, do you know what? I've called it target ID. That should have been target URL. That was today's deliberate mistake of the day. Congratulations if you saw that. Well done. So here we go. AAABBB, AAA, and where's my BBB? We'll take this params thing this time. Chuck this in here. There you go. Right, okay, so I've got my three values now coming in. And congratulations if you spotted that one, by the way. Alright, so what's going to happen is when I send this, I want a little pop-up to appear. One of those little modals, you know. So after the form here, I'm going to have a div with a class of modal and an ID of response modal. Something like that, okay? Now this by default is going to have a style of display none. So you're not even going to see it. However, it will contain a div with a class of modal heading. And in here I'm going to say HTTP response. And then we're going to have a class of modal body. Now, for the moment, I'll just do a paragraph with a little bit of lorem because I just want you to see this, okay? And do you see how this has got an ID of response modal? Well, when we hit send, I'm going to just say open modal, and it's going to be, we pass in the ID, which is response modal, and watch what happens. If we refresh and hit submit, you'll see that we get this pop-up here. Kinda cool. Now we can go in here and add in a paragraph with a class of text center, and I'm just going to write the word close. Okay, now I'm not even really seeing that, but it doesn't matter because I'm going to add a button in here. Okay, so let's just have a button like that. I'll just write close, and I'm going to say on click equals close modal in parenthesis. So now when I click on, when I click on send, forgive me, my mouse is acting very strange here, but you can see that I've now got this close button, and it's very easy to just open that and close it. Okay, that's pretty cool, pretty cool. Alright, now let's do a wee bit of styling here. So we'll say that the modal body is going to have a color of black, so all the zeros here, and there it is. And let's also say that for the modal body, if it's a paragraph, we'll make it have a text align of left. So again, there we go. Although, having said that, that appears to have messed this up. Well, let's just make this a div. Okay, that's perfect. Alright. Now, this modal body is going to have a response code, which is going to be something like 200, for example. And then it's going to have a response body. That's what we would expect to have back from, you know, one of these things, right? And with the response body, we're going to have a text area. Something like that. Maybe with an ID of response body. Doesn't really matter what the name is, it's all JavaScript here. But if we save and refresh, that's pretty much the type of thing that I would expect to receive back from something like this, you know? And of course, we don't want anything hard-coded, so what we'll do is, with this thing here, where this response code is, we're going to say span ID equals response code, and then close off that span tag, and there we go, right? So now it's all empty, but at least it's ready to be populated whenever we do get a response. Okay, now the next thing that we're going to do is when we open up this modal thing here, the modal, I want us to have a little flashing thing that says sending, because sometimes there might be a delay of a second or two before you get a response, you know. So I don't want people to be looking at this for a second or two. It would just be kind of rubbish. So what we're going to do then is we'll take this, right, you see how we've got this modal body and we've got all of this stuff here, right? Or rather this, the response code and the response body. Okay, let's put that inside a div with an ID of response info. It's a div, right? And that is going to go like this. And there is response info. Now, let's have another div above this. Another div with an ID of sending alert. And sending alert is just going to have a little squiggly line. And maybe it's just going to say sending. Something like that, okay? Now, if we save and refresh and then click on this, we get something like this. Of course, we can take our ID of sending alert. Let me just do that for a minute. So sending alert, I'm going to give it a text, a line of center. Maybe make the font a bit bigger, font size 1.4. And as we submit, I don't even know if that font size made a difference, 1.4M. There we go. So, fair enough, right? But what we can do is when we hit send, we're going to say document.getElementById, sending alert, we're going to say .style.display equals block. Then we're going to say document getElementById response info. So that's all of the response info, the code, the body. We're going to say .style.display equals, and it's going to be none. Okay. So if we now refresh and hit submit, we get that. Okay, that's what we're looking for. And that's pretty cool. If you want, you can give this a little minimum height. Maybe, I don't know, anything that makes you feel good. 300 pixels or something. So we end up with something like that. I'm not even sure if that was good. You know what? I'll make it 200. And yeah, that's fine. I mean, style it in any way that makes you feel good, okay? Now, what is going to happen is when we get a response, the sending thing is going to disappear, and then we're going to populate this thing with whatever we've got, you know? Now, I'm going to just simulate this so that you can see how this is going to work, right? So if we do a set timeout, and let's assume that we're going to wait 1.5 seconds, something like this, right? So what we can do is take these two little beauties and we're going to flip them around. So the top one is now going to say none. The bottom one is going to say block. And then let's just say document.getElementById. And it's going to be response code dot value equals, I'll just say new code to go here. And then document, now hang on, the response code is inner HTML, I just remembered that. It's inner HTML. Then I'm going to say document getElementById response body, that's the one that's dot value because it's a text area, and I'll just say response body to go here. Okay, so you can see this is inside a set timeout. I'm just simulating how this is going to work. Now let me refresh here, and I'm going to hit submit, sending, and there you go. So that's exactly what we're looking for. I think that is going to be fantastic. Okay, now one of the things that I would like to also do is I'd like the sending to be flashing. It just would be kind of a nice thing to do. I cannot remember how to do that, so I'm going to go into the app and search, because I know that there's a class here called Blink. So if you search for .blink inside your folders, you'll find one here, and just find that .blink. I've got it in here somewhere. Here it is here. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to copy this little animation here, or the code for it. Copy the whole lot. And let's just paste it into our styling. Who even cares how it works? But it's basically a class of Blink, you know. And if we go to our H2, which is here. No, it's not an H2, pardon me. It's the sending alert. And I'm just going to say class equals Blink. Right, now save that. Refresh. Hit send. And do you see how it's now blinking? Looks kind of cool. Here it is again. It's blinking. That's what we're talking about. Thank you very much indeed. All right. So that's not too bad. Now we'll do the clear form. Let's do that while we're here as well. So for that, I just remembered the clear form. So for that, let's add in another array thing here. I'll just say on click, assigned to, let's just say clear form, and there you go, parenthesis, right? So we'll make up a little thing down here maybe. I'll say function. We're going to call it clear form. And what I'm going to do is just clear those first two form fields. Now to save time, I'll copy here, paste in. And so I'm just going to say document.getElement by ID, target URL value is empty, and the parameters value is also empty. I'm not going to worry about the drop down. So if we refresh, here's some stuff, and here's some stuff. I'm going to clear the form. There you go. Easy as that, right? Nice, simple JavaScript. By the way, somebody was saying in the live stream, why do you use var? Use let if it makes you feel good. In fact, this brings me on to the business of doing the actual post request. So, or whatever the request may be, it might be a get, who knows, right? But that's what we're going to focus on now. So let's just do that right now, actually. So now we are actually going to be sending this thing. So I'm going to say, now let me remember how to do this. It's going to be const HTTP equals new XML HTTP request. Then it's going to be HTTP dot open. Now I'm going to pass in two things here. I'm going to pass in the request type, and I'm going to pass in the target URL. That is how we do that. Then I'm going to say HTTP dot set request header. And I'm going to pass in two things here. It's going to be content-type of application/JSON. Then, just as we send this thing, I'm going to say http.send, and I'm going to pass in the parameters. That's all there is to it. So that is going to send this thing across. There is alternative code for doing this in JavaScript. There's the fetch API stuff, and you can use that if you want. I happen to like this because it's very robust. This will work on Blackberries and everything. which is why I use this type of code, but you can use whatever makes you feel good. So now I'm going to say http.onload. Now this is assuming that we've got a response, right? And when we get a response, we're going to have a function that does some stuff. And we're going to, first of all, we're going to get the status. So we can say var, let's just call it response status. Now the way that we get that is we just say http.status. It's as simple as that, right? And then I'm going to say var response text is http.response text. Pretty simple. And then now that that's all taken care of, well, now we can take this stuff here. In fact, let me just take this out. Okay, head up. Alright. So right in here, we're now saying, right, get rid of the alert, make the info appear. And now, by the way, if you want to save some lines, you can do that. We don't even need this, strictly speaking. We could just say that the response code is http.status and the response body is http.response text. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Believe it or not, that's it done. So just to show you this working, I'm going to say get, and we're going to go to welcome. So the welcome endpoint /test, and if we hit submit, you'll see that it gives us a response code of 200 and it says hello world. That is absolutely perfect. Now if we open up our welcome thing, we could have easily just said HTTP response code, and you can add in anything you want, like anything, you know. And if we submit here again, you'll see that the response code has changed this time. Now, if you have a look at the Trongate framework docs, there is a section called Understanding HTTP Response Status Codes, and it tells you what all of those numbers mean if you want to look that up. But for us PHP developers, it's just one line of code and it's going to change that. So that is perfect. I'm going to finish up by just demonstrating. Now that was an older one I did. I'll finish up by demonstrating how this parameter thing works. So let's imagine that we've got an endpoint for join. Maybe this is for joining a mailing list or something like that, right? So this one is going to accept some posted variables. So I'm going to just say posted data is file get contents PHP : / input. Okay, and then I'm just going to say data is JSON decode posted data true. This is all just pure PHP. And then I'm just going to say var dump data. All right. So if we now, let's just refresh this for a moment. Now I'm going to do a post request. I'm going to go to this URL here /welcome. Oops. /join, and I'm going to chuck in some parameters. Now the parameters would go in JSON format, so we'll do a curly bracket and I'll just say first name, let me just say John. We'll do last name and we'll say Smith. Anything that makes you feel good. City. Well, actually, probably if it was an email list that you're joining, maybe email address or something like that, you know. So info@example.com, and then you would close it off. So that's how you would add parameters in. And when we now submit this, well, you can see our response code of 200 and you can see that our var dump is working perfectly. That's coming from here, by the way. If I echo, it works with a die statement. It really does work, and it's absolutely fantastic. So there you have it. Kind of easy. This is, of course, a really basic example, but I'm sure if you had more time, you could do something fabulous. I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you again soon. Cheers.